Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
I think out of all the things that Donald Trump has ever said that have offended my core, this is it. How dare you, Donald Trump, tell me what it takes to be a good Jew and not be a good Jew, and what it takes to love Israel and not love Israel. First of all, you stand for nothing what Judaism is all about.
Today, we've got a brand new fake controversy. Donald Trump on our pal Sebastian Gorka's radio show, also seen on the Salem News Channel. He said this, and if you watch mainstream media, this is all you would see about what Donald Trump said related to voters in America, Jewish voters in particular, supporting Democrats. This is what the mainstream media wanted you to see.
Person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves because Israel will be destroyed. You have Iran now making a nuclear weapon. None of that would have happened with me. That's a big.
All right, so there it is. That's the headline. That's what you'll see all over the place. Donald Trump says that any Jewish person who votes for a Democrat hates their religion. And he did. He said that. Just like he said there'd be a bloodbath. He said that. But let's give you the full context. And let's give you everything that he said leading up to that moment so that you see what informed that opinion that President Trump expressed.
Could you explain why is it seemingly that this administration, including Chuck Schumer in the Senate, hate the man that Israel chose as their prime minister? Why do the Democrats hate Bibi Netanyahu?
I actually think they hate Israel.
Yes.
I don't think they hate him. I think they hate Israel. And the Democrat Party hates Israel. And the Democrat Party, if you remember when many Israeli representatives, including Netanyahu, when they came to the country begging, at that time President Obama, please don't make the Iran nuclear deal, which is a disaster and was a disaster. And I ended it. But unfortunately, they didn't do anything with the ending of it. I ended it and would have had a new deal made with Iran. It would have been good for everybody, and there would have been no nuclear weapons. You know, they're very close to getting a nuclear weapon right now. Yes. And once they have that, it becomes a different form of negotiation, a much more difficult negotiation. But I really believe they hate Israel. And they also see a lot of votes. Don't forget, when you see those Palestinian marches, even I'm amazed at how many people are in those marches. And guys like Schumer see that. And to him, it's votes. I think it's votes more than anything else, because he was always pro-Israel. He's very anti-Israel now. Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves because Israel will be destroyed. You have Iran now making a nuclear weapon. None of that would have happened with me. That's a big thing. With me, Iran was broke. They were absolutely.
Yeah. So there now you have the full context of what he said. And laid after he made the case about the Iran nuclear deal and about how Joe Biden is now trying to disarm the Israelis as they fight after the October 7th attacks, the fact that Chuck Schumer says that Benjamin Netanyahu is the impediment to peace, that they're calling for a two-state solution, which would be a reward to the terrorists, that they consistently over the years continue to undermine the Israeli government and the Israeli people, for that matter, at a time when the Israeli people are incredibly solidified in their support of Netanyahu and his government. Well, it's kind of easy to reach that conclusion. It's like, what are these voters thinking? What are they doing? It's certainly against their best interests. And one is forced to remember when Joe Biden was running for president 4 years ago, and he went on the Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God, and made his case to black voters.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community.
Now, you remember that. You're having trouble figuring out whether to vote for me or Trump. You ain't black. Ain't. Now, that's rude. That's odious. That's wrong. And you, like I, probably thought that was actually pretty despicable and racist. at the time. But here's the funny thing. Mainstream media, people on the networks, New York Times, Washington, they didn't even mention this, let alone decry it and say that it was inappropriate, wrong, or racist. So what's Donald Trump supposed to think? Oh, these are the new rules? This is how we're supposed to operate? You vote for a guy who undermines your own community, in your opinion, then that makes you a betrayer of your community, and I can go ahead and say it. Okay, then I'll say it about Jews who vote for Democrats. Those are the rules, right, that the media has laid out for us at this point. By the way, just tangentially, we've actually found some self-hating Black people who probably, in Joe Biden's opinion, aren't authentically Black, because guess what they're going to do this November?
In 2008 and 2012, you voted for
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. 2016,
I voted for Donald Trump.
Hillary Clinton. 2020,
Donald Trump.
Biden. And who will you vote for in 2024?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. You may vote for the former president.
I may.
Why do you say that?
My views on certain things have changed. I am very much so riding the fence.
What are you struggling with?
Being in a pattern of doing the same thing that I've been doing, because it's kind of like second nature. Like when you go in a poll, you hit Democrat. Something has to happen. I mean, it's just so expensive to survive. And we're planning on having kids. I don't want to live in a stressful environment trying to rub two pennies together to try to make it either.
I regret to inform this lovely young couple that they are not, in fact, Black. Joe Biden told me so. This is a silly game that is played, isn't it? But it's the game that accentuates the divisions in this country, that further divides. Listen, we are divided. This further divides and accentuates and exploits those divisions. I wish we didn't play this game, but it's the game we've been given. It's the rules of the game that we're living under. And of course, this morning, the Democrats, they jumped right in and they played along for their part. What was their reaction to Donald Trump saying that any Jew who votes Democrat hates their faith? Well, it's exactly what you'd expect.
Now is Haley Soifer. She's the Chief Executive Officer for the Jewish Democratic Council of America. Thank you so much for being with us. Donald Trump, who is not Jewish, is telling Jewish people how to be Jewish. What issue do you have with that?
Thanks, John. Well, what we heard yesterday from Donald Trump was entirely consistent with the message that he has sent to the vast majority of American Jews for years. In 2019, he said that any Jew who supports Democrats is either disloyal or uninformed. And he's conveying this message of contempt and anger toward Jewish Americans because he knows that 3/4 of us will never support him. So our message to Trump is, as he continues to demonstrate animus towards Jewish Americans, the feeling's mutual. It's only going to continue to grow as we head into November. And according to the latest poll by Pew, 79% of Jewish voters disapprove of Trump. It's among the highest disapproval of any religious group. So why is that? It's because he says he wants to be a dictator on day one.
Yeah, okay. You know, a good follow-up question here would have been, a la George Stephanopoulos, how do you square your support for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, considering they're supporting the very same people who just slaughtered 1,000 Jews at the music festival near Gaza and continue to try to undermine Israel's right to exist? Right? I mean, isn't that the real question? By the way, I do love the very concerned and furrowed brow. They're really good at the furrowed brows over at CNN, aren't they? Donald Trump, who is not Jewish, is telling Jewish Americans how to be Jewish. Last I checked, Joe Biden isn't Black. And he told Black people how to be Black. This is where we are right now. And by the way, George Stephanopoulos isn't a woman and certainly isn't a rape victim as far as I know. But he's telling Nancy Mace and other rape victims how they're supposed to behave as rape victims. And it goes on and on and on. It's absolute silliness. And over at MSNBC, it was beyond hysterical. Donnie Deutsch filled the Jewish seat on the table this morning there.
I think out of all the things that Donald Trump has ever said that have offended my core, this is it. How dare you, Donald Trump, tell me what it takes to be a good Jew and not be a good Jew, and what it takes to love Israel and not love Israel. First of all, you stand for nothing what Judaism is all about being a decent human being, about being kind to others. You are the farthest thing from what anybody should say what a good Jew is or isn't. And make no mistake about it, for anybody who says, I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's automatically good for Israel, he would turn on Jews in a second. This is a guy who has a fondness for Hitler, according to his ex-chief of staff, John Kelly. This is a guy who said there's good people on both sides of Charlottesville. He would turn on Jews in a second if it was in his best interest. I know this could be very controversial. He doesn't care about Israel. He cares about Donald Trump. And how dare you tell me what it takes to be a good Jew?
Okay, yeah. So when you have to lie to make your point, like the good people on both sides lie in Charlottesville, you've lost the argument. And when you say he'll turn on Jews in an instant if it helps his political hide, you mean like Joe Biden is literally doing right now because he's worried about losing Michigan because of the pro-Hamas vote in Dearborn? So after years of giving lip service to Israel, he's now throwing them under the bus because of his own pathetic political hide? Is that what you mean, Donnie Deutsch? Yeah, this is the game we have to play, everybody. But how would Donald Trump ever reach the conclusion that Democrats don't support Israel? Well, maybe this might have something to do with it.
As a lifelong supporter of Israel, it has become clear to me the Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. The world has changed radically since then, and the Israeli people are being stifled right now by a governing vision that is stuck in the past.
That is Chuck Schumer standing on the floor of the Senate calling for regime change in Israel, not in the Palestinian Authority, where they've got a one-term president who's now celebrating his 20th year in office, not in the Gaza territories where Hamas is in charge. Yeah, the same Hamas terrorists that just slaughtered over 1,000 people. And by the way, why do I need to keep reminding everybody, are still at this moment holding Israeli and American hostages and sexually assaulting them. Why are we even having any of these discussions while our people are still being held against their will? But he's not calling for regime change there. No, it's Benjamin Netanyahu who has to go. He claims that the Israeli people are being stifled by this government when their representatives in the Knesset just gave a vote of confidence 90-9 to support Benjamin Netanyahu's approach to this war. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's actually trying to meddle in the political affairs of another sovereign nation. So why would Donald Trump ever get the impression that Democrats don't have Israel's best interests at heart? Think about this for a minute. It's like a political party overseas within months of the September 11th attacks saying, you know, Osama bin Laden has a point and Al-Qaeda has a point. The U.S. should really leave all of their assets in the Middle East right now and never set foot on the sand of Saudi Arabia. Close down your bases here and in Kuwait and anywhere else you are. And by the way, the state of Israel should disband. That was another demand from Al-Qaeda, right? Al-Qaeda wanted Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth, and they wanted number two, Great Satan, to retreat. At least we don't have to disappear completely. We just have to leave the Middle East. Can you imagine a foreign leader like Chuck Schumer, the equivalent of Chuck Schumer, in a country that's supposed to be our ally, basically saying, you should do everything Al-Qaeda is asking for here. Let's move on from 9/11 because the world has changed. Because Chuck Schumer asking for Netanyahu to be replaced and a so-called two-state solution to be put in place literally rewards Hamas. Now that the October 7th massacre has happened, it's time to give Hamas exactly what they want. Although, to be fair, they don't really want a two-state solution, do they? No. They want the map to look like this. They want to erase Israel and replace it eventually permanently with the pretend made-up word Palestine. Now, in this case, they've just done it with a little Post-it note. But this is what Hamas has done. They put a Post-it note up there and they... Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. This image is not from Hamas. I got that wrong. I apologize. No, you know what this image is from? Do you know where this map exists? Do you know where the map of the world that has a Post-it covering up Israel and relabeling it as Palestine. Do you know where that is? That hangs in the office wall of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Dearborn, Michigan, a Democrat. That's what this image is from. That's where that map hangs. That's now who holds the power in the Democratic Party. Gosh, where would Donald Trump ever get the impression that Democrats don't have American Jews and the Israelis' interests at heart? I can't fathom it. So you saw who the morning network or cable news shows decided to put on to combat what Donald Trump said yesterday. You know who they didn't have on the air? Well, they didn't ask the opinion of this man, Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think what he said is totally inappropriate.
Sorry, he's not talking about Donald Trump, by the way. He's talking about Chuck Schumer.
I think what he said is totally inappropriate. It's inappropriate for to go to a sister democracy and try to replace the elected leadership there. That's something that the Israeli public does on its own, and we're not a banana republic. I think the only government that we should be working on to bring down now is the terrorist tyranny in Gaza, the Hamas tyranny that murdered over 1,000 Israelis, including some dozens of Americans, and is holding Americans and Israelis hostage. That's what we should be focused on. And as far as what Senator Schumer said, the majority of Israelis support our governments. 82% of Americans support Israel instead of Hamas, but the majority of Israelis support the policies that we're leading.
That's right. And so it really does sort of, if I may say, beg the question. If 82% of Americans support Netanyahu and the state of Israel, and if the overwhelming majority of Israelis support Netanyahu and the state of Israel as they're conducting themselves after the terrorist attacks of October 7th, then why would Chuck Schumer do that? Why would Chuck Schumer say that? And it's because he and Joe Biden and the Democratic Party are now beholden to the same woman who put this map up on her wall. It's the only answer. It's the only solution. Where does Donald Trump get the notion that the Democratic Party doesn't have Jewish Americans' interests at heart? You know who else Morning Joe and CNN didn't have on the air to react to this? This guy. Talk radio host and television host Mark Levin. He's Jewish. You know, the only Jewish people they brought on were Donnie Deutsch and the woman who runs literally the Jewish Coalition for Democrats. Sebastian Gorka retweeted a message this morning that highlighted his interview that caused all this kerfuffle. He recorded this video from the basement of his secret lair, it appears, and said President Trump was right in his comments about Democrats and Israel. And Mark Levin reposted that and said, yep. Why isn't Mark Levin invited on Morning Joe to actually mix it up a little bit and say, here's why he's right and here's why you're wrong? Joe Scarborough isn't Jewish. The only Jewish person they can find is Donnie Deutsch to lend his opinion. Listen, I got to be honest with you. I'm not Jewish. I am actually a quarter Jewish by ethnicity, but I wasn't raised Jewish. I wasn't raised in the Jewish faith. I don't think it's up to me to determine what makes a good Jew or a bad Jew or how a Jew should behave or not, and whether that keeps them in consort or in right with their religion. Honestly, it isn't. To be fair, it's as much Donald Trump's right to say how a Jewish Democrat is in relationship with his faith or her faith as it is for Joe Biden to tell a black person whether they're authentically black or not. Neither of them should be doing that. But we're certainly not going to sit back and only give one of them a pass like the mainstream media has done. Listen, Joe Biden calls himself a Catholic, just like me. And he supports abortion on demand. He goes ahead and takes the Eucharist and participates in the Holy Eucharist on a regular basis, even though he is committing a mortal sin. I don't. And as a Catholic, I have every right to say something about it. If I know of another Catholic voter and they have the choice between an ardently pro-life, anti-abortion candidate and a pro-abortion candidate, and they choose the pro-abortion candidate, yes, I think I have the right to lend commentary to that person and whether their voting habits are in line with their faith. But ultimately, it's for each and every one of us to decide. I am not Jewish, but I certainly have a fealty to the people of Israel because they're on the right side of this issue. They're the victims of terrorism, and they're our only geopolitical ally in the area that we can count on. If we undermine Israel, like set aside the religion for a minute. If we undermine Israel in that region right now, and they are no longer a strong enemy of this nation, who exactly do we have to count on in a pretty critical part of the world? Who are we going to be able to work with? Who are we going to be able to cooperate with? Seriously. And to that end, here's Peter Doocy yesterday with our national security advisor. Set aside the religious faith. Set aside all of that aspect of it. Just in terms of pure geopolitical wisdom and diplomacy and the best national security interests of the United States of America, what the hell are we doing here with everything we're saying about our real ally over there? Watch how this exchange with Peter Doocy and Jake Sullivan went down.
Why did President Biden wait so long? Why did he let 32 days pass between phone calls with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, so first of all, our teams are in contact every single day at every level. President Biden gets a daily, twice daily, sometimes 9 times daily update on what is going on. And he reserves his calls for the prime minister for when he believes there's a key strategic moment that needs to come forward. That's point one. Point two, prime minister, of course, knows how to reach President Biden. If the prime minister felt he needed the president for some reason, he would have picked up the phone and called. And of course, in the last 32 days, President Biden has never declined a phone call from Prime Minister Netanyahu. So this is pretty much the normal give and take of two leaders, both operating their governments, both operating their foreign policies, both working with their teams. And then at a key inflection point in the dialogue between the two sides coming together and talking. I wouldn't make more of it than that.
And there's a report that when President Biden was told his handling of the war between Israel and Hamas was starting to affect his poll numbers, the quote is, he began to shout and swear. So when he does that, is he shouting and swearing about Netanyahu or about Hamas or about his poll numbers?
This is the when did you stop beating your spouse question, because I don't think he ever did that. And so, well, you use that as the premise of your question, which is when he does that. I've never seen him do that, shout or swear in response to that. So from my perspective, that particular report is not correct.
Wow. The whole when did you stop beating your wife thing needs to be, shut away. It's a stupid remark to make. And certainly a little bit tone deaf in the context of this conversation. But that's Jake Sullivan basically saying that NBC News is a bunch of liars, which, I mean, we'd be inclined to agree with as well. But you see how he did that. The question was great. So there's reports that he starts shouting and swearing. Is it because of his poll numbers or what? And Jake Sullivan merely says, well, I've never seen it. Okay, well, have you heard other people talk about it, Jake? That's not a denial that it's ever happened, although since he's never seen it, he can't comment on it. Wow. Okay, good to know. He's really a valuable asset there for Team Biden. But of course, his job is not to answer questions or communicate anything. His job is to lie to you and continue the propaganda from the Biden administration. This is depressing stuff. It makes you feel like we're never going to be able to reach any kind of conclusion or any kind of resolution, or for that matter, ever kind of win against people who are undermining our values and our principles. But can I just tell you something? Once in a while, I see something, especially with stories like this that get so convoluted and they get so entrenched in what team you happen to be on and identity politics and all that stuff. I see something that breaks through, and it gives me hope. It tells me, you know what, maybe we are going to make it through this whole thing. Maybe there are enough of us who actually see through the bull, who actually are going to be able to just keep our heads down, focus on the facts, focus on the fight at hand, and end up on the other side of this whole thing, bruised, maybe even bloodied, maybe even a little broken, but still bonded together as not just Americans, but as the humanity that we are. Would you like to have a little bit of that hope too? All right. As usual, it comes in the form of a comedian, a British comedian who sort of sees through it all. Watch.
Did you see the other day, a couple of days ago, a man got arrested for carrying a sign that said Hamas are terrorists? Did you see that? Now, wait, now he got arrested for that because that is just blatant disinformation, isn't it? That's Hamas are not. I know Hamas are not terrorists. I checked it on the BBC fact check site. So I know that they're definitely not. But of course, you know, it's very difficult at the moment because we saw these protests. We're having them every weekend. It's really up my shopping, you know. And there was that moment where Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is a group that is outlawed in most Arab countries, Hizb ut-Tahrir was standing there calling for jihad. Now, to be fair on the Met Police, they acted very swiftly, didn't they? They put a tweet out, didn't they? Put a tweet out. And it said, the word jihad has a number of meanings. And it does, you know, we assume that jihad means holy war, but it's more of a kind of yoga retreat. You know, it's more like, it's very peaceful. I went for a jihad at my local spa and I had this thing called an intifada. It's, you know, it's a face wash. It's a kind of, with tea tree and lavender oil, that kind of stuff. You know, it's at the river to the sea beauty experience. You should try that.
See, we get it. We get it. We just got to stick together and laugh at them and mock them just like that. We know the truth. We know they're lying to us. And we just need to keep reminding ourselves. And we can be fine. And I'm thinking of doing the show with a glass of red wine from now on. I mean, after Easter. I've had to abstain from certain behaviors. But I might have to do that. That's a good vibe. I like that.